This wouldn't be Chicago without the soaring architecture. The communities, the neighborhoods we call home, so many visionaries pieced together our breathtaking mosaic. But few have added as many brushstrokes to our city's masterpiece with a tireless passion that began in 1893 at Draper and Kramer. Chicago, turn of the century. A Midwest boomtown where, back then, a skyscraper didn't scrape much sky. 2 decades earlier, the folks here weren't happy when Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over that lantern that created that fiery unpleasantness. The World Columbian Exposition came to town in 1893. The same year, Draper and Kramer opened its first 2 offices in the Loop and a branch in the rapidly growing South Side, where they were building that elevated train line. Who knew it would be so popular? The early 1900s. While Chicago built the Biograph in Wrigley Field, where the Babe called that historic World Series homer, Draper and Kramer was busy calling its future, pointing to the still-to-be-built neighborhoods and becoming one of the city's premier mortgage banking and residential management firms. At the beginning, Arthur Draper and Adolph Kramer had a vision to help people live the American dream, to own their own home or business. As a pioneer in providing financing and promoting home ownership, Draper and Kramer were one of the first few lenders in the U.S. to be appointed an FHA-approved mortgagee. A year later, Draper and Kramer appointed a mortgage loan correspondent for New York Life Insurance Company. Today, they are approved with over 20 other companies. As Chicago rose from the ashes, Draper and Kramer's vision grew with it. Building wasn't quite as easy then. The horseless carriage was still a few years away, and building materials arrived on trains and trolleys. And although stockyards were the big stock in trade, the city was already an architectural wonder. Through the 1920s, major landmarks rose high above the lake, including the Palmolive Building and the Chicago Board of Trade. Draper and Kramer remained a big part of that boomtown. The company's founders became community leaders. Arthur Draper, an early Chicago Mortgage Bankers Association president, and Adolph Kramer, president of Chicago's Real Estate Board, first in 1920, then again a decade later. Then, the crash. The Great Depression. Despite the hard times and many competitors closing, Draper and Kramer persevered without losing a single worker. Things looked brighter in 1940 when the firm began leaving an indelible mark on Chicago. Founder Adolph Kramer's son, Ferd, helped push President Roosevelt's New Deal promise for low-rent housing, and then headed to Washington to run defense housing, bringing his Washington contacts back to Chicago after World War II, becoming the company's chairman, creating plans to develop Chicago's South Side. That vision became the nation's model for the 1950s federal urban renewal programs.
The South Side had deteriorated so badly that all the development had been north of the river. And I decided that we wanted to resurrect the South Side.
Advertising was different back then, but still effective, helping fuel sales and growth through the next few decades. But it was Draper and Kramer's commitment to equal and mixed housing that created some of Chicago's finest communities. Ferd Kramer kept the company's promise by moving into those developments himself.
Well, I wanted the public to realize that I had faith in what I was doing, that if I wasn't willing to live there, why should they live here?
Draper and Kramer led Chicago, actually led the nation in breathing life into long-neglected neighborhoods. The firm's Lake Meadows was the first federally mandated urban renewal project after the war. More than 100 acres blossomed into 10 glass-enclosed, high-rise apartments and a neighborhood shopping center. Even the firm's vice chairman, Fred Ford, was one of Lake Meadows' first residents. From there, Prairie Shores, Chicago's first integrated housing project. Each Draper and Kramer urban renewal project giving Chicago new luster. Even the White House recognized the firm's extraordinary public service.
This picture of President Johnson and me was taken at the time that he appointed me to a commission on equal opportunity in housing.
On this land, a $150 million residential community is being built from the ground up, and this new community is called Dearborn Park.
Draper and Kramer touched so many major projects in and around Chicago. Leasing and managing the Inland Steel Building, regional shopping centers including Old Orchard, Oakbrook, Hawthorne, and River Oaks, branching into Chicago's suburbs and beyond. Draper and Kramer's vision continues recognizing those jewels of communities and buildings worthy of renovating and preserving. The historic Palmolive building, once home to the Giant Soap Company, was the first high-rise anchoring the Magnificent Mile. After nearly 3/4 of a century as office space, its exquisite Art Deco exterior no longer matched what was inside. Draper and Kramer changed that. Extensive renovation, excavating underground parking and car lifts, refurbishing original carvings and lanterns. They've transformed the Palmolive building into a luxury residential high-rise, attracting world-renowned retail. Lighting the beacon atop this landmark structure completed Chicago's newest, old crown jewel. Today, Draper and Kramer services reach far beyond traditional real estate. From being the largest single office for commercial mortgage banking, to property management, conversion, shopping centers, residential developments, industrial parks. From insurance to research and analysis, investments and developments not only here in Chicago, but reaching across the nation and beyond to Chile. Draper and Kramer continues its devotion to our communities, understanding the impact the firm has on businesses, workers, our neighbors, building strong bonds with each organization, donating time and expertise to our city and its institutions, public commissions, universities, charities, the civic bedrock that supports all of us. Draper and Kramer's extraordinary service has stretched into a third century, from the 1800s to today, creating a one-stop resource for clients housing their families, their corporations, finding financing, researching future development, breathing life into long-forgotten neighborhoods, adding heartfelt brushstrokes to the lakeshore masterpiece we call home.